At a deeper level, we risk a vicious cycle in which an inadequately resourced government performs badly, leading to further demands that it be cut back, exacerbating performance problems, deepening the backlash, and creating a vicious cycle. That is why, while recovery is our first priority, it is essential that we establish long-run parity between revenues and expenditures. Now, this is a more complex matter than is often supposed. One of the more important and less well-known ideas to come out of the economics profession over the last generation or so is the phenomenon known as Baumol's disease. In certain areas, rapid productivity growth is possible. In other areas, it is much more difficult. It always has and always will take 8 teachers to teach 96 students for 1 hour in classes of 12. Productivity improvement simply is not possible in the way that it is in other activities. Similar phenomena apply to almost anything that involves direct human interaction. Think of nursing care as another example. Moynihan's corollary to Baumol's disease is the observation that there is a tendency for those activities in which Baumol's disease is most pronounced to migrate to or be located in the public sector. Take just one example. Every 5 years, the share of GDP devoted to government spending on health care goes up by 1 percentage point. As we contemplate our long-run fiscal future, we must contemplate this reality rather than to suppose that there is some past static pattern of revenues and expenditures that can be maintained indefinitely. That is why the work of the Bowles-Simpson Commission is so important. That is why President Obama committed himself to health care cost reduction in the context of the recently enacted health care legislation. If there ever was an area where President Kennedy's doctrine that man's problems were made by man, and therefore they can be solved by man, if ever there was an area where that doctrine applies, it is to the budget deficit. The United States improved its structural deficit by nearly 4 percentage points of GDP between 1993 and 2000. Greece and Ireland are being called on to make fiscal adjustments in the range of 10% of GDP. Once our temporary fiscal support expires, we need an improvement only in the 2 to 3% range of GDP to begin the process of putting our debt on a declining path relative to our income. President Obama has already taken several important steps in this direction: a multi-year freeze in spending outside national security, a serious effort to root out wasteful, outdated spending in every area, particularly defense. A particularly welcome feature of the recent Commission report is its bipartisan recognition of the idea that tax expenditures are just like expenditures and need to be held to the same standard of efficiency, fairness, and tough tests on government intrusion into the economy. They say walls of worry. So it is with our nation. America's history, in a certain sense, has been one of self-denying prophecy. A history of alarm and concern, but alarm and concern averted by decisive actions to ensure our prosperity. One CIA director warned of our largest competitor, that industrial growth rates of 8 to 9% per year for a decade would dangerously narrow the gap between our two countries. That was Allen Dulles in 1959, referring to the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed instead, the Harvard Business Review of 1990 proclaimed in every issue in one way or another, that the Cold War was over and Germany and Japan had won. Now we hear the same thing with respect to China. Predictions of America's decline are as old as the Republic, but they perform a crucial function in driving the kind of renewal that each generation of America, that is required of each generation of Americans. I submit to you that as long as we're worrying about the future will be better. We have our challenges, but we also have the most flexible, dynamic, entrepreneurial society the world has ever seen. We can make the right choices. Our best days as competitors and prosperous citizens still lie ahead. Thank you very much.
So our procedure now is we're first going to take some questions from the audience. And we gave out cards earlier. They're being collected. We'll take a look at a few of those. And then after a few of those questions, we'll go to the press. So let me first start with one of the questions. In your speech, you pointed to the need for greater education. As you know, the typical college graduate is earning today what he or she did 10 years ago, and that was the case. Those stagnant wages were the case even before the recession. So what does this tell you about the additional need for policies to deal with wage growth so that every worker can benefit from productivity advances?
Our college graduates or our high school graduates find themselves embedded in a individualistic competition with workers from around the world, or if they develop skills for which the demand is going to fall because of possible replacement by technology, their wages are not going to rise. A necessary strategy for increasing wages is that we develop areas of unique strength that are less subject to international competition. That means the vast range of activities described in my speech, where the market is inherently local. That also means maintaining the capacity for innovation so that our production is producing things that are not in what business strategists call commoditized businesses, where that competition is going to be most brutal. It also, I might just say, goes to the quality of education as well as the quantity of education. We've seen an enormous emphasis on measuring achievement, raising standards, increasing accountability on school systems, on teachers, on students at the K-12 level. I would predict that over the next 2 decades, we will see a similar kind of focus on accountability and improved performance come to higher education. And I think if carefully managed, that will be a very good thing.
Another question. Given all the developments in the economy over the last several years and your experience as an economist, what has happened that might lead you to think economics itself needs some accountability and some change?
Oh, look, I don't see how the events of the last decade can fail to have an important impact on economic thinking at a number of different levels. To take just 3 examples, in the standard introductory economics textbook discussing about business cycles and the like, financial intermediation is essentially not mentioned. There's a discussion of the interest rate as it affects the money market, and the interest rate as it affects investment incentives, but the issues around financial intermediation are not mentioned. Obviously, after what we have been through, financial intermediation will need to be much more prominent as an issue in mainstream economic thinking. Second, mainstream economic thinking is still dominated, and this is what you learn about in an introductory economics course, by the production of widgets, which has a rising marginal cost curve. The idea is you have a market, and the whole thing is go with a rising marginal cost curve. In the knowledge economy, the canonical good is going to be a good that has a very high fixed cost to produce, and then has very, very low marginal costs. Think about publishing a book. Think about a program of software. Think about a pharmaceutical product. Think about what's happened to the ratio of design costs to production costs in automobiles. If you think about such a market, high fixed costs, low marginal costs, if you have standard competition that pushes prices back to marginal cost, the firms won't be able to stay in business. And so, in a whole set of ways that I don't have time to talk about now, the canonical form of an industry is going to be different going forward. Third, when I went to graduate school, which was some time ago, but was not exactly ancient history, one of the things you learned about was that a striking fact of American economic life was the stability of the income distribution. And that was a quite reasonable reading of the data from the end of the Second World War to the late 1970s when I was in graduate school. It is a manifestly wrong reading of the data over the last 2 decades. And what is especially salient in the data over the last 2 decades is there are significant movements in skill differentials of a kind economists understand quite well in terms of the relative demand for college-educated and high school-educated labor and the like.